Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a digital painting of a photo of a hero or villain. So to start off, we're going to go to Photoshop and open up the program. When the program's open, go up to File and click New. Click on the Print tab and we're going to choose View All Presets and then A3. And on the side here, we're going to keep it at portrait, 300 resolution pixels per inch. We're going to change the color mode to CMYK, and all the rest looks fine. We're going to give it a title. So my character is Loki. And then I'm going to click Create. Great. So now when we have this up, you should have already found a photo from the internet that we're going to use. Ideally, it will be a large photo and of pretty good resolution so we can see detail. I have mine saved in this folder here. This is my character. And so what I'm going to do is in Photoshop, go up to File, Place Embedded, and choose from my desktop, Digital Painting, Loki, and then say Place. Now I'm going to click, hold and drag to make the picture bigger and put it in the center. I'm going to leave mine down a little bit so that I can draw, because this part of his helmet here is missing, but I can just use my imagination to extend it up. And when we're happy with how it's sitting on the page, you can click the tick up the top here. And it has created its own layer to the side here. If you can't see your layers, go up to Window and choose Layers. Now to create this digital painting, we're going to be using the Wacom tablets. So make sure you have the Wacom tablet either plugged in or connected to your machine, and so that you're using the pen for all of these next actions that we're going to be doing. The Wacom tablet is a little bit tricky to use when you're not used to it, but with practice you will get better at it, so just persevere and it will be much simpler and easier for you than using the mouse for this kind of work. Alright, so now let's look at our image and decide how we're going to separate some of these elements so that we can digitally paint them as easy as possible. What I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to make a layer for just the clothes here, and then I'm going to make a layer just for the helmet. I'll show you how to do all this. And I'm going to make a layer just for the skin. So that's going to be 3 layers as a starting point, and also one for the hair. So that's going to be 4 layers actually that we're going to start off with and then build on top of that. So let's start with the first layer. Let's do the clothes. So in your layers panel, go down to the little plus sign to create a new layer. And what's very important with this project is to name your layers correctly. Otherwise, you'll have so many and you'll get confused on what's what. So do it as you go. So I'm going to call layer 1 the clothes. And then with my brush tool over in this side panel here, I'm going to have that one selected. And I'm going to choose the hard round brush. That size seems to be fine, but you can change the size up here. You can also hold down Control on your keyboard, and if you click with your pen, it will give you these options as well as a quick shortcut to that. Now we're going to be creating this portrait in a monochromatic color scheme. I've chosen green, but you can choose whatever color you decide for your character. So what I find is best is I chose a color by moving this slider part here, and I'm going to start off with this one. But what I also want you to do is have open this color panel here. If you can't see it on your machine, go up to Window and then choose Color. Mine's disappeared now, but if I bring it back, I'll be able to see it. So this is the color range that I'm going to be working with this digital painting. So with this current green selected, and on my clothes layer, I'm going to go in just to create an outline of the clothing shape. So just click, hold and drag, and then draw your shape. If you make a mistake, you can use the eraser tool. Command plus will zoom in, and if you hold down space bar, it will give you the hand to move around your document more easily. You can always go in and just tidy things up. This is with the eraser tool. Then if I hop back to the brush tool, the brush tool shortcut is B on your keyboard if you want to start to work quickly that way. And then just continue on creating the outline of this part of his clothing. Go all the way around because we will need to use this in the next step. Alright, so that's looking okay for this part. So now I'm going to go over and use the paint bucket tool. If you can't see it, it might be underneath the gradient tool. So just click and hold and then choose paint bucket. And inside this area that we've just created the outline, I'm just going to click a couple of times so that that area is all filled in. Great. It looks a bit funny, but we're going to make it better as we digitally paint. So for the next part, I'm going to do the skin. So I'll create a new layer again, and then I'm going to double click here and call it skin. And I think I'll make the color a little bit lighter up in this top section here. And then over with the brush tool, we're going to do the same thing that we just did for the clothing, and that is outline all the skin parts. Now I'm not going to worry about the helmet at all for this, or the clothing, because what we can do is layer, move around where our layers are positioned so that it hides those imperfections. So when you have the outline of your shape, go to the paint bucket tool and then fill it in so that we don't have any lines inside there. Cool, it looks like a funky green blob at the moment. Let's create another layer, and then this one I'm going to call helmet. And because I can't see the helmet behind the skin layer, I'm just going to click the eye on this layer, and it will just make it invisible for the moment. I'm just going to choose another type of green, maybe a little bit more over to this side, but you choose whatever you need to choose for your particular image that you've got. And same thing, I'm just going to go in and create an outline of the helmet. I might have to reduce my brush size for these little finer parts. So to do that, you can go up to here and make your brush size smaller, or you can hold down Control on your keyboard and then click, and that will give you those same commands. Or you can use the square brackets on the keyboard. They will make the brush bigger or smaller depending on what you need. Alright, now that I finished the helmet outline, I'm going to go back over to the paint bucket tool and click inside a couple of times to fill that in. And I'm going to turn my skin layer back on, and cool, so now that's behind, we can see, so that's good. We can even move the skin layer to be behind the clothes so that it's trimmed in like that and it's a bit nicer. Let's also do the hair layer, so create a new one, a new layer. Let's call it hair. And I'm going to make that a bit of a darker colour using my brush tool and go in and outline this, just like we did with the other shapes. And I'm just going to connect these shapes up over here. And then with the bucket tool again, we're going to fill it in. Cool. And let's move that behind. Great. So I also want you to have up on your screen a picture of your character, just to have side by side as a quick reference. You might have to move your workspace around a little bit. Photoshop can maybe be made a little bit skinnier. Alright, so to start off with, to start to add some of these highlights and shadows to digitally paint this, I'm going to choose my helmet to begin with and create a new layer with a little plus sign below. Now what we're going to do is on our keyboard we're going to hold down Option, and that's going to give us that icon there. And so click that, and what it's done is created a clipping mask just to that helmet layer. Now I'm going to double click this and call it Helmet Highlights. And this is where I'm going to draw all of these highlights that I can see with the helmet. So with the brush tool, I'm going to go and choose this time the hard round pressure opacity. And let's have a look at what this one does. So let's also choose a lighter color, because now we're doing the highlights as labeled in our layers here. And let's zoom in, Command plus to zoom in. I'm just going to start to draw some highlighting areas that I can see just here. The harder I press on the Wacom, the more colour it applies to the painting. And see how that if I draw outside, it doesn't show up. And that's because we've created that clipping mask. So I'm just going to erase that and tidy up these little parts here with the eraser tool. So it's going to be a bit of a dance between your brush tool and your eraser tool. So I'm looking at here and then I'm drawing what I can see. Another thing you can do is on your helmet layer, you can reduce the opacity. You might have to turn your skin layer off if that's in the way, and your hair layer. And I can see what's happening behind. But just keep in mind that it is an opacity, so we can only see it at whatever opacity we have set the helmet layer to, so 57%. So if you're drawing away and it looks different when you turn the opacity back up to 100%, that's why. So it's up to you how you feel will work best for you, working straight off the reference image you have to the side, or reducing the opacity on your Photoshop document. Making sure that you're working on the right layer. I wasn't for that one. You might have to make your brush a bit smaller in some sections. Use the eraser tool to tidy up. This part will come more easily to you with practice. So just give it your best. If you need to change the color, you can do that. I'm going to make this part a little bit darker. If you want to sample a color that you've already used, go over to the eyedropper tool, click it, and then go back to your brush tool, and then it will be that same color that you were using. So we can see here some highlights are starting to happen. Now let's start to put in some shadows. So let's create a new layer. We're going to hold down Option on our keyboard to create a clipping mask to our helmet layer. And we're going to call it Helmet Shadows. And we're just going to do the same thing but with a darker color because it's going to be for the shadows, and maybe a larger brush as well. So I can see here that we've got some shadows there. So we're just going to paint them in. I can move this to be below my highlights if I want. Then it's hidden away, and then we're just painting in. Maybe some parts we want to be a bit darker than others. So we'll just go in and do that as we go. Use the pen pressure sensitivity to your advantage. On my highlights, I'm going to make these little bits here twinkle a bit more. So we can see that it's starting to take shape. So let's have a look at the skin now. And we're going to do the same thing. So create a new layer, and holding down Option, we're going to create a clipping mask, and we're going to call this one Skin Highlights. And then we might as well create another one, create a clipping mask by holding down Option, and we're going to call this one Skin Shadows. And just like we were doing before, we're going to create the highlights of the skin, so like the bridge of the nose, the tip of the nose, this side of his face, the chin, and then the shadows are going to be these darker areas here, his nostrils, creases in the nose there, and we're just drawing shapes, not lines. So just focus on creating shapes with colour and don't get bogged down in the details of the line work. So this is an area that it might be better for us to reduce the opacity and making sure we're on the correct layer. Go in and create those highlights with our brush tool. Then in the shadows, using a darker colour. Alright, so I'm going to leave it there for you now. So keep using your highlights and your shadows to create your